Cha-ching! It's a 4 o'clock hour on Business Monday. Gary Sasse, the money man. He's been everywhere doing everything. You're up in New Hampshire with your no labels friends, Democrats and Republicans, trying to come up with some solutions for America's problems. I think GoLocal a few months ago published the agenda. Mm-hmm. You had C-SPAN running, covering you guys.
National coverage, yes.
From gavel to gavel. Nothing's better than gavel to gavel. I've always wanted to be covered gavel to gavel. Talk a little bit about what happened up in New Hampshire.
Well, just don't get hit by the gavel.
Yeah, don't want to be hit by the gavel.
Well, there was a convention of the Problem Solvers Caucus. Let me just give some background. Problem Solvers Caucus of 48 members of Congress, 24 Democrats, 24 Republicans, and they work together.
None of them from Rhode Island.
None of them from Rhode Island, but we hope we'll correct that one of these days. And they work together to promote solutions to the problems the country is facing. And they have quite a good track record. They snuck up on a lot of people. They were instrumental in the rules reforms in the House. There used to be, for example, a motion one representative could move to vacate the chair. That's how they used to keep John Bonner in knots.
Right.
And they changed that to a third to vacate the chair. The Rules Committee could hold bills for closed rule, which means you could not amend it, and they got that changed. Now bills can get out if they're sponsored by 2/3 of the members or the majority of each party. So they've had good success in opening the rules. They were very leveraged and strategic. They also had good success in humanitarian aid to break the border stalemate between the president and the Congress.
Right.
Where the $4.2 billion was made available, and that came from this Problem Solvers Caucus. Problem Solvers Caucus is really an outgrowth of the No Labels Group, which was started about 10 years ago by Joe Lieberman and centrist politicians on both sides of the aisle. And their objective is pretty simple: to work together. 75% of them have to agree if they're going to promote an issue or take a position. And their major thing in life could be summarized in this phrase: not left, not right, but forward. And they've developed a unity agenda, which you published, which now is getting quite a bit of attention in the Democrat primaries. And no one loves the unity agenda, and I can tell you bits and pieces that I would rather not see there, but the whole concept of compromise, moving forward, moving with moderate positions, compromise is not a bad word. And so I don't know what much detail you want to get into the agenda, but they have they don't have Medicare for all, they got health care for all.
Well, let's go to New Hampshire.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about what the event was, who was there, what do you think the takeaway was for a national audience who watched that?
Well, I think the takeaway for a national audience was that you could have respectful debate and discussion, that politics should not be controlled by the extreme right and the extreme left. As a matter of fact, Frank Luntz was there, the pollster, and he told me, and I think was quite sincere, that the focus groups he had with this group was very different than what he's been experiencing around the country, when there was a lot of polarization, hatred, animus. He said, I actually had a focus group where people were speaking to each other, and they didn't always agree, but they were cooperative. So it really, the message sent is that our politics can be civilized, or that we can solve our problems by compromising. Compromising is not bad. If I get 5 and you get 5% of what you need, we can move ahead. And the problems are solvable. Energy is a great example. We have a plank on energy, which supports the carbon tax. But also at the same time, it says that the public ought to get the dividend back. It ought not go into government programs. It talks about, we have an infrastructure program which talks about an additional 1% tax on freight, 1% above the corporate rate, which will produce $100 billion, which will make a big dent in our infrastructure problems. Health care for all, we have a program which says, no, let's have a public option to buy into Medicare when you're 55, so we can afford it. But at the same time, let's tighten up on costs by negotiating drugs differently, dealing with tort reform. So you can see that everything in the program, no one gets 100%, but everybody gets something, and the country moves forward to solve a problem. And that's what's missing right now, whether you're a Democrat and it's the extreme left, and they're going to blow this election with as far as they're going to the left, or it's the extreme right or the cult of Trumpism on the other side. There's a whole big body of people.
Right. The vast majority of Americans lives in the middle between these two isolated polarized political ideologies that are now emerging. You know, you said Joe Lieberman was there. Joe Lieberman, of course, senator from Connecticut.
Susan Collins was there.
Susan Collins was there. But stick with Joe Lieberman for a second. Very close to John McCain, although a Democrat, and was going to be his vice presidential nominee, I think, for a period that I think people thought the two of them would be connected with one another.
And you know what issue knocked it off the rails? Right, the abortion issue.
Yeah.
Because Lieberman had a record of being pro-choice, and the Republicans just at that point did not want to have a pro-choice candidate.
Right.
I think if no one had talked about that issue, he would have run for vice president. But he almost succeeded as vice president in 2000 on non-abortion.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, here you have the no labels agenda. It's moving forward. Can the tenets of it, the agenda items in it, be what saves the Democratic Party? Are you going to start to see anybody begin to talk about some solutions which the majority of Americans support? Listen, it's a fight to the left right now in the Democratic primary. No one can get left enough, right? And that track record that they define themselves as in the primary is not going to be forgotten when they go to the general election, whoever wins the Democratic primary. Is this maybe potentially some of the solution?
I think it's a solution for both parties, because you just define the Democratic Party problem. I could define, I can define the Republican Party problem as extreme rightism and a cult of Trump. And neither.
But the Republican problem is this cult of Trump. It's less ideological in many instances.
But
it's so confused. He's not a traditional this or a traditional that.
But it's a do-nothing philosophy, because they're getting absolutely nothing done.
Right.
So, and I think Americans want their problems. The answer to your question is yes. And one of the things that was most heartening about this meeting, there are, as I said, 45 congressmen in this part of the
Men and women.
Men and women, part of the problem-solving coalition in Congress. 15 of them were there, about a third of them were there. And they made one statement that really cut to the, and you could just see in their body language how they respected each other, how they worked with each other. But one Democratic congressman said, I was in a Republican district campaigning for a Republican candidate who's part of the Problem Solvers Caucus, because I got to know him. And we work together, and I find out that we can, move things. And so you're seeing among partisans,
incredibly important.
But they're paying a price. The price is this, and to a man and woman, and they were both men and women from the caucus there. They said the biggest political issue they face is retribution and scorn. And every one of them that spoke, everyone I spoke to, said because they worked with the other party, cooperated with the other party on issues, they were being primaried by the extremes in their party, whether it was the Trumpists in the Republican Party or the extreme left in the Democrat, Party. And what it was so heartening to me is, I'm a right, but a center right, being moderate, was that these people were working together, and they were working across party lines to watch out for each other's back. I think that's a movement that's going to happen, and the initial political agenda that came out, because the no labels does support candidates who want to join the Problem Solvers Caucus, and if you have a primary, we're going to be down there to help you.
Yeah.
But the one thing they did, which is just so important and seems so basic, they have an initiative that they're starting that came out of this convention called Get in the Room, and all Get in the Room does is to get people in the states that are part of no labels to ask their senators and their congressmen to attend, not to join, but to attend one meeting a month, just so you sit down with the other side and you have a cup of coffee and you talk about issues. Because what became clear is if you create the very simple things of getting people to talk to each other, things happen. Governor Well was there. He mentioned one thing which I was familiar with. He said that when he first became governor, he went to the House Speaker and the Senate President, old Billy Bolger, and he said, look, why don't we get together every Monday afternoon in the afternoon to have a cup of coffee and talk?
Yeah.
And he said that served more than anything else break the gridlock, because if they had a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock on Monday afternoon, at 8 o'clock Wednesday morning, they weren't calling the other guy the son of a bitch because they knew they would see him the following Monday.
Yeah, right.
And he said successive administrations have done that in Massachusetts. And look what's happened. Look what's
Right.
happened with education. Look what's happened with development. Not so much on transportation, but look what's happened. So yeah, I came away energized. I came away, hopeful that there were people that we can grow this base, that will talk about problem solving, and we'll fight like hell. If I think things going too far left, we'll talk about it. And I'm sure the other people, if they think things are going too far right, they'll let me know. But it was a whole different atmosphere. It was so different from all the other political meetings that I've been to the last 2 years. It was an absolute antidote to
Partisanism.
to partisanism, to Trump's tweeting, to the extreme left of the Democrat Party. And so I don't want to be polyandrous and don't want to be naive, but it was a great political convention. It started at 9 o'clock breakfast on Sunday morning, and people sat there all day, mesmerized till
That's
about
great.
5 o'clock. It was really a great time.
Well, let's bring you back to reality. Let's go back
I want to live in Wonderland.
Let's come back to Rhode Island and dysfunctionalism. The news last week was Mark Christofouli, who, I'm guessing, is a solid man, works for 2 different major gambling companies over the course of his career. In between those 2 assignments, he was in a leadership position of one of the biggest construction companies in Boston, Suffolk. My guess is he's been in a few rough and tumble experiences. He sent a letter to the Senate Finance Committee chairman outlining how he felt threatened in a phone call with Brett Smiley, Chief of Staff to the governor. Your thoughts? We've both been around. We've both been in environments with governors and speakers. My takeaway was if you took threats out of the State House, it would be quieter than the quiet train on the Excel Express coming back from New York.
If every time I was at a political fight, when I was in the State House or City Hall, and I called the guy across the hall some name that wasn't pleasant, and I had a nickel back for that,
The money man would be even richer.
the money man, yeah. No, I don't want to get down to that level, because I think what's happening, the unfortunate thing that's happening, and this is a very simple problem to solve. I mean, if you got people of goodwill to sit around the table, you could have this thing worked out in an hour. And
It's a deal. There's a big pile of money.
well,
There's a big service that needs to be done. I think most people agree. GTEC's one of the best in the world at doing it. Twin River, also valuable to the state's economy, has no experience in doing it. They have different experiences and different expertise. Sit them down, get a deal done, move along.
Yeah, and there are certain things that you would wish to happen, but they may not happen politically. First of all, it should be bid out, but it should be transparent. But it really should be, and I've had this conversation with the people too. There are 2 different issues here. There are 2 contracts. One contract is the operation of the lottery and servicing it, and the other is the VLTs. If you have to make a political deal with IGT to maintain the contract and provide the service, it should never be 20 years. That's crazy. But you could do that. You need to take the VLTs out, because I was involved with the Cherry administration, and we did the bankruptcy, and Twin River was created, and it was never the intent to give anybody a monopoly over the VLTs. Monopolies are costing the state money. It's costing hundreds of millions of dollars. It's costing the state. It's a lot of money. And so why not separate it? Why not work out a negotiated agreement with IGT to provide the lottery service? Why not say no one gets more than 50% of the slots, put that out to bid, get the best possible deal? Because there's overwhelming evidence that the state is losing money. Twin River needs whatever monies they can realize and be a real partner in this operation, because competition is different, and that would be a deal. Unfortunately, it's become personal, and when it becomes personal, it's very hard. And I put a lot of the blame on it becoming personal to the governor, because instead of saying to the legislature, here's the deal I negotiated with IGT, I don't know if this was done or not, but I would have sat down with the legislature first and said,
Well, I'm going to correct you here.
okay,
The governor came out with the first missive. It was announced, I want to say, the end of June. In that press announcement, announcing that deal, was positive statements, both from the Speaker of the House and the Senate President endorsing that structure.
so what happened?
So
What it flipped?
I think it's switched because Twin River needs to change up their business model or they can't survive. They are getting pantsed by their competitor in Massachusetts, and they're scrambling under a new business structure that's publicly traded to diversify their revenue, and they're trying to get into some additional business sectors. No harm, no foul by doing that. And then it's just degraded into he said, she said
Because it doesn't
across the
have-
board.
It doesn't have to be different business sectors. It has to be given, Twin River needs to be given a fair share of the VLTs. And from a management, from an economic, from a governmental view, monopolies are bad things. Monopolies have to be regulated, and they're not, they're not, you know what the return is, and it's not always the best return. And so I think it's pretty simple. I think you take, say, 50% of the slots, as we originally negotiated with GTEC in 03, would be maintained by IGT. 50% of the slots would go to Twin River. They're all owned by the lottery anyhow, because we're leaving money on the
I got to tell you, I don't even think the deal is the issue anymore. We now have a governor and speaker who are so adamantly opposed to whatever the other one says or does that it is creating dysfunction in managing the state.
But at a certain point, that's
And IGT versus Twin River is one example of it. We can go straight across the board on almost any issue being promoted by either one of them, and the converse is being said by the other.
well, at a certain point, they both have to be sensitive to the fact that we're talking about $300 million to balance the state budget. So you can make a case that gambling is a
Absolutely.
balancing peg in the state budget.
And between the two companies, thousands of jobs.
Well, and that's the point. See, when government tries to pick winners, they always pick a loser. And the Twin River jobs is just as important as the IGT jobs.
I'm going to push back there.
And
The Twin River job
Oh.
is a low-paid job, it's a service job, it's a tourism job. The IGT jobs are much higher level. The average household, the median household income in this state is $63,000.
Yep.
The average salary is $110,000 at IGT.
But that's the wrong way to look at it. You should look at no, I appreciate your point. But what I want to see is the median salary. I want to know how many people are making above and below that point. But no, you're right. Your point's well taken, that these jobs...
These are real jobs.
These are professional jobs.
Yeah.
But the Twin River jobs, and if you look at what's happening to where we're growing jobs, we are growing jobs in the hospitality sector. And while the jobs may not be as professional and pay as well, they are jobs. They are legitimate jobs. And
Listen, we're going to need more of them. I don't know if you saw our piece on Saturday on what's the degradation of America's retail environment. We're up to 9,000 store closures across the United States, a record. Looking at 12,000 store closures by the end of the year. Looking at a worse year, according to Credit Suisse, in 2020. So we're going to see that retail economy continue
well,
the
retail
to shrink.
economy is shrinking, but retail is not necessarily shrinking because it's done differently.
Absolutely.
And that's why the Twin River jobs are important,
Right.
because they're an alternative to working in the Macy's or the Filene's,
Yep.
if they still exist.
I don't believe Filene's is still
Yeah,
around.
that's just been so long time.
Caldor's
Yeah,
there,
it's been so-
Leechmere, they're all gone.
What about outlets? Is it around?
The outlet, no, Shepherd's is having trouble too, I
Okay.
hear.
No, and so that's why their value in both jobs, and the win-win for the state. And I would be very blunt with Twin River. I would say, if we're going to get rid of this monopoly system on the VLTs, then you've got to do something for us. You've got to guarantee a certain amount of additional jobs. I don't know what that number is, but we could do a much better job of leveraging more money for the state, which the state needs, more money so Twin River prospers and grow employment at Twin River, if you recognize that we're dealing with two different things. We're dealing with a technical lottery service business contract, make a lot of money, and we're dealing with management of VLTs inside a gaming facility. And they're not the same, and they were tied together in 2003 because everything was different, situation was different. G-Tech, in fact, was a homegrown
Yep.
local company, but there was no gambling in Massachusetts, there was no sport betting.
Yeah,
there was
absolutely.
a whole number of other
Listen,
things.
the whole game's going to change completely. Massachusetts new Plain Ridge and up in Boston are both under fire for missing their revenue estimates to date, as well as MGM out in Springfield. So this is a very complex dynamic, and also I think everybody's thinking about it in the known. Technology is going to continue to gobble up more and more. It is going to be app-driven. It's going to be on the phone, whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings or some other new emerging technology company. The gambling will take place far more often on a device than it is going to take place in a club environment at any of these
And
venues.
that makes my point that in dealing with IGT, the rules that existed in 2003 when we had
Yep.
the first 20-year contract don't exist. It's lunacy to say we have a 20-year contract based on what you defined and described as a changing condition. And I'm saying you can solve the problem by giving IGT.
Let's go out of IGT and Twin River. The governor and the speaker's relationship has always been difficult since day one. Over 5-year period, it has gone down and down and down and down. It is personal. It is dysfunctional. How does this get back on track?
Yeah, I don't do shrinking.
Henry Kissinger, Gary Sasse, shuttle
It get-
diplomacy.
It gets back on track when it gets to a point where it's in everybody's self-interest to get a problem, solved. And the clock does tick, and it reaches that time, and it's not pretty getting there. And sometimes it's a much more inefficient system. And don't watch the sausage being made, eat it. So you can't make people like each other, but you can make people meet their responsibilities, and they both have responsibilities. And if they don't do it out of mutual respect, then they have to do it out of mutual utility. And
They're more like mutual hatred right now.
But-
Let's jump over the
That's
the,
not good.
the,
That's good.
the,
I'm glad we're jumping over that one.
the gang of CEOs who have been involved with this education reform announced today that they're giving $163,000 to support classroom needs, chalks and books and stuff like that. And the new commissioner had a big press conference on the $163,000. We did quick math here. That's 2 days of salary for Larry Merlo alone, just Larry Merlo. Forget Hasbro and all the rest of them. Is it time to get this game up a notch? If I hear one more person say we all need to be patient, generally the people saying we need to be patient in how we're going to improve the Providence education system have their children at private school. When is the urgency going to start? We had this conversation, wrestled last week. No defined plans, no overall game plan how we're getting there. The state's now in charge. There's no superintendent in Providence. Is it just press conference? Is it education reform by press conference?
Well,
We've had 2 in 3 days.
It's complex. So let me give you two answers to the same question. She has two different questions. Okay, the first question, is, you have to ride the horse that brought you there. And right now, the commissioner is the horse we've chosen to ride. And you got it, whether you and I feel that there being a sense of urgency or not, that we don't know, because we don't know all the details of what they're doing. And so I am still of the mind that watch her, as Reagan would say, verify, and give her some rope and some time. And the commitment made to the people of Providence was that the plan would be available by the first of the year. It is not the first of the year. I think it's very discouraging, and I think they dismiss with excuses the fact that they don't have a permanent turnaround superintendent. Everyone's rallying around. Well, it's hard. We can't pay. The sun doesn't come up on Thursdays. Whatever the excuses.
Dog ate my homework.
Whatever the excuses. That certainly is not a high mark, but that she is the best chance we have to fix this system. And before I criticize, I want to see what happens. I think there's been a slip. I think as far as the business guys are concerned, if the reform looks like it's an elitist endeavor, it's not going to succeed. And I'm hoping that she, and I think she does understand that it has to be more of a community endeavor. The other thing is these guys are getting on cheap. First of all, they got all kind of tax cuts here over the last 10 years, from the income tax to the corporate tax to you name it. Taxes which could have been used to pay for schools. Now they're coming up with 100,000 here and 100,000 there, and I think it's not just the $100,000 check, which is fine. If they want to do good work and make this a charity, but don't make it a charity. It's public schools. If they don't do good work, that's fine. But they got to get personally involved and committed. So I look at the 12 millionaires that sit, like Jesus' apostles. They sit on this board and say, "Oh, don't worry, I'm going to give you 100,000 so you get chalk." No, I want you to say who you are. I want you to volunteer to be on school committees. I want you to write op-eds to the newspaper. I want to know who you are, what you're standing up for, and what you're doing, and how your business is. Not do things behind the scenes, but be transparent and out front. And I think there's all kind of great things can happen if the business community operates in a transparent, not in an elitist fashion. And so giving the guy $100,000 to buy chalk is good. No one should criticize that. But that's not going to solve anything.
Yeah, give the Ryans credit. They've given, in the most recent gift, $35 million to URI, $50 million over the past decade or so. Real money. They're demanding things out of that. There's milestones, there's deliverables. $100,000 here and $100,000 there is, in the grand scheme of the size of these corporations, a very insignificant amount. I think that the burden on them is, why don't you put up some real money and say, when you hit your milestones, we'll deliver.
I'll tell you a real thing they could do. And see, it's not just the philanthropy of O'Brien, which is extremely generous to
Spectacular.
URI and the state. It's just wonderful. But this is an organization. This is not 12 individuals. This is the Partnership for Rhode Island. So instead of giving $100,000 for chalk,
right?
Why don't you adopt a school? Why don't you say, we're going to fund and operate Mount
Right.
Pleasant High School, and we're going to make sure that Mount Pleasant High School has the best teaching tools, the best science laboratories.
Right. There's going to be an internship program. We're going to do job training there. We're going to do mentoring.
Now, when you do that, this is the other side of the coin.
You have to deliver.
Well, not only you have to deliver, but you have to get into a fight, because you have to stand with the unions and say, we're adopting Mount Pleasant High School, and you're going to cooperate with us. We're going to do professional development. We're going to work with you. You're important people. Can't do this without teachers. But this is the kind of flexibility we need to run Mount Pleasant High School or John Smith Elementary School or whatever it is. Now, that would be great if these 12 guys would stand up and say, we're taking over this high school, and we're going to put hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into this high school, and we're going to make it a demonstration school and a show school, and the 2,000 kids that attend that high school are going to get a good education, and they're going to have an opportunity to develop the kind of skills they need to become productive citizens. That's great, and that's what the business community ought to be doing, but it's not paying for a $300,000 finance study or $100,000 of chalk. Great they're doing it, because it's unfortunate, and it's a commentary on all of us that we can't do it publicly.
Right.
But if it's going to be financed privately, which is good, then it ought to be financed transparently, because it's for public purpose. And so I commend them on what they're doing, but now I really want to see them belly up to the lip log and take a real swing at that
Take
ball.
it up a notch. Gary Sasse, as always, the money man.
My pleasure.
A pleasure. Congratulations on your success up in New Hampshire. Hopefully that has an implication both to the presidential effort and to the country as a whole. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Tomorrow is Kate Nagel Day. We have no idea if Jennifer Lawless will be on. None. I don't. Get ready. We'll be on the lookout to see if Jennifer Lawless is back tomorrow. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Check out some updates to GoLocal, and we'll see you tomorrow.